Okay. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 105 of Bell to Bell with Bobby Blaze. I am your host, Professor Jeremy Vilmur, and joining us now, Arn Anderson's favorite enhancement talent, Double B, Bobby Blaze.
Hey now, man, I feel like my head's just floating, Jeremy. Man, I've got some water in my ear or something, dude. I'm floating around over here.
Been hanging out with Aquaman lately, or what's going on?
Yeah, a little bit. I guess so. I don't know, man. It's just started happening the other day. I got a little bit off balance. I just contributed to hell. I thought I ate something with some MSG in it or some shellfish in it or something. And I think it was Thursday. I don't know, but anyway, maybe I had some water in my ear from a shower. And then this morning, the same thing, and it was actually fine until I got in a swivel chair and put the headphones on. It just kind of like threw my balance off. But hell, the show must go on. We know that, man. We ain't got time to bitch, piss about it. We'll just get through it. I may have to ask you to repeat a question or two, but other than that, let's get on with it.
All right. Well, let's see here. We got a couple news stories we want to hit first.
Yep.
So let's see, Bobby, I'm going to let you take the lead because we lost a couple people. We missed one last week. We got one yesterday, so I'm going to let you take the lead for now.
Yep. All right, yeah. So sadly, right after we got finished recording last week, I got a message from my brother. We was just texting back and forth, and I'd missed it some way, but he sent a thing that Buddy Colt had passed away on March 4th at the age of 85. And I was really sad to hear that. Buddy had everything to be, could have been an NWA World Heavyweight Champion. We know that. Man, he just a good class act, dude. I got the chance to meet him twice while I was in Tampa. Think around, I told you this about WFLA headquarters down there at the radio station once, and then a couple weeks later, Dean Malenko and myself were out and we ran into him, and Dean introduced me to him, and it was nice to meet him because he's, very professional man, well respected. We've talked about it before. On 1975, he was the pilot in the plane that crashed into Tampa Bay with Dennis McCord, Austin Idol there, and Gary Hart, and then of course we lost Bobby Shane, but Buddy never could recover enough. He tried a couple of matches. Both his feet was torn up pretty bad, but he came back as a manager and a booker and a referee, and ended up being a TV commentator with the great Gordon Soley. And his real name was Ronald Reed, R-E-A-D, and when he came back, he went several places, but I think he came back from Australia and realized he wasn't being used right, and that's when he changed his, was into bodybuilding and stuff like that, and he changed his physique a lot, and dyed his hair blonde and became Buddy Colt, and the rest is history on that part of it. So just hate to hear that. Mike Monaghan wrote a really nice article about him. Mike was the one that posted it that Sunday evening. And I wrote Mike on there, and he said, yes, Bobby, he was a class act, and I will be writing something. It came out yesterday. It was a really nice article, and Mike just has a way of doing those things. And I'm looking at right now something I was gifted this week. My brother sent me a book showed up here. It was Final Bell by Mike Monaghan, Legends of the Mat Remembered, including, and it has, I've read about 3/4 of this book already in a couple of days. Roddy Piper, Johnny Valentine, Dusty, Wahoo, etc. So sadly, another one may come out, and he can catch up and do some of the ones he had to do recently, and maybe he'll include the great Buddy Colt. So we're gonna miss Buddy Colt. Even though he hadn't been active here for the last few years in the world of wrestling, a lot of us old timers and fans like us, we remember Buddy Colt, man. So. That's one passing. You want me to mention the other one as well?
Yeah, let's go ahead and keep the depressing stories going.
Okay, probably my all-time favorite boxer, man. Great middleweight, marvelous Marvin Hagler. He was, a lot of people probably say, oh, Bobby, I thought maybe Ali or Tyson would be your favorite. Well, I just always drawn to Marvin Hagler, man. He was the undisputed middleweight champion in 1980, defeated it 12 times until he lost it to Sugar Ray Leonard in 1987. He was 62-3-2 with 52 knockouts. Thing I liked about him, man, he stayed hungry, and he was always hungry and always in great shape. And he stepped away when he was on top of the game. Even though he got that defeat there, he didn't look back. He was at the right age. He didn't take, didn't stay out there and get punch drunk and waste all his money or anything like that. He knew when to get out, and he got out of it. But don't know what happened yet. But at the age of 66, the boxing world lost a great one last night in marvelous Marvin Hagler. And man, I just remember so many of his great those fights in those middleweights when you had Roberto Duran, Tommy Hearns, Leonard, and Hagler, them guys, they were just warriors, man, just warriors out there. That middleweight division all through the 80s were, and he was a king of that division for, like I said, for 7 years straight. He was the man, So we lost him as well. So that's two. I'm not trying to start off here, being down or anything. That's just two people that I think with what we deal with on professional sports, professional wrestling, and professional entertainment, that is important that we remember those two fellows there, and we'll go from there, Jeremy.
Yeah, I came across a story yesterday after Marvin Hagler, the news came out. He got into boxing because he got roughed up by a local boxer that was like being bullied or beat up by him. So he got into boxing, and then later on he would win against that guy in a fight, in an actual in-ring fight. I thought that was kind of a cool story because it's that kind of Charles Atlas, like, hey, fuck you guys, I'll show you in 6 months. I'll be back here and whip your ass.
Yeah. Don't kick sand in my face.
Exactly. And real quick before we get started on this week's stories or theme, Billy Corgan has announced that as part of a memorial for the question mark Josephus, I'm drawing a blank on his real last name right now, who passed away recently, his former tag team partner Aaron Stevens will be facing Nick Aldis for the NWA title at their pay-per-view at the end of the month.
Okay.
While I think Aaron Stevens is funny, I don't know how I feel about him as a wrestler, but I look forward to seeing this match.
Yeah. And I think it'll be actually next Saturday, 21st, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
What? Next Sunday, I believe. Yeah, you're right.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Sunday the 21st. Okay.
Yeah, you're right. So they have announced that as the title match. I did see where Thunder Rosa wrestled a match last weekend where she came out with the Mongrovian flag. She is a legit badass, so I appreciate everything she does.
Yeah.
And let's see.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, this week we're going to do something a little bit different, not completely different. We did this back around Thanksgiving where we did a show with a similar theme. We're going to talk about the year 1981. Now, one of the reasons this one jumped out at me, obviously, it was 40 years ago, so there's a reason to look at it right there. But also, as we were doing some research for other shows, this year kept turning up for a number of reasons. So this looked like it would be a fun one to do, so we're going to do that. Bobby, you want to tell us anything about the year 1981?
One thing that I just, right before we went on the air there, I said Reagan got shot.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a junior in high school. Seemed like right after lunchtime, I could be wrong at the time. I was trying to think. We had a big glass building. We had 7 buildings in our school, all glass. And I remember when it happened, because everyone's out on campus and you could see, I was in the classroom, but it must have been during a lunchtime period, because either that or the students, some of the seniors might have gotten left the classrooms or what it was. It wasn't like chaos or anything, but you just knew something crazy had happened,
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't know if he was dead, of course, or not, and people were hustling to get. We didn't have the internet, and we didn't have TVs, television sets in every room. I was in the history wing, I know that, the Building 6, and like I said, I could see right out to the center of campus there, and they were trying to get some TVs to the different, like if there were three junior science classes, they were trying to get us into one room and get us or a history class, where get us on get a TV so we could because the teachers were interested just as much as the students were, of course. But yeah, President Ronald Reagan got shot. That was a big deal that year.
Yeah.
And I'll let you take over the next couple.
Sure.
How's that?
Well, yeah, and I remember that. I was in school. Obviously, I'm a little younger than you. I was not a great student, so I don't have a lot of memories of school. I kind of try to block it all out. I remember that day, and I remember when the Challenger blew up. I mean, because those both happened while I was at school, and that's when they started rolling TVs out. And obviously with Reagan, that was before cable TV was everywhere.
Yeah.
So, we had to try to first off, in a big concrete building, you got to try to get an over-the-air signal on rabbit ears, which was not easy. But yeah, I do remember that. Also that year, Betty Davis Eyes by Kim Carnes was the #1 song. Okay. Dallas was the #1 TV show. And here in the States, REO Speedwagon's High Infidelity was the #1 selling album.
Wow. It's a lot of good music that year. I do remember that. I thought you was going to say Marty Feldman Eyes, but
yeah, it was like on Dr. Demento. They used to play that.
Yeah, it was one of those. I knew Dallas was the #1 TV show. For some reason, I just knew that, and I didn't watch it. Not that I wasn't a fan. I've seen it since then. I knew the characters. You didn't have to watch it to know what the hell was going on.
That was pop culture.
But I knew that was I knew that was #1 show. So yeah, that's just some of the stuff that's going on. I had some other stuff just going to throw off here. I couldn't find all of them, Jeremy, but I had 3 that I thought was interesting. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to tell them to you, and then you tell me if you like them or agree or whatever your reaction is going to be. It's nothing tricky here. I found 3 PWI, Pro Wrestling Illustrated covers from that year.
Okay.
No, I'm lying to you. I found 2, January and February. I couldn't find March. And then they started getting real mixed up, and then they wanted this other thing, wanted me to join Pinterest or whatever that is. And anyway, so I thought, well, this is enough because we've got a lot of good stuff on this show to fill in.
Yeah.
But so January cover, I found interesting. Not because it had Hulk Hogan on it, because we want to talk about Hogan during 1981, but who he was tied up with?
Who's that?
Pat Patterson.
Really?
Yeah, that was the cover. It was Hogan and Patterson. I thought that was interesting, and for reasons we'll talk about later on in the show. Some of the headlines on there: you could win an official Mil Mascaras mask. I don't know what you had to do that, but it was advertised as that. And the pin-up on the inside was of Bruno, and Bruno's name is going to come up again here later on throughout our podcast too. The second one, I know you'll pop for this one, man. So the picture was Patera and Morales. That was like the center picture of February of 81, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But on top of it, there was the Freebirds, and it said, birds of a feather crippled together.
Nice.
Yeah, and if you bought that issue, the pinup was Ricky Steamboat.
Oh, there you go.
Just there you go. So just like a couple little items there. I wish I could have found them all, because we probably could have done the whole 12 months there and just talked about each PWI cover of the year of 1981. But I thought that's some interesting stuff there, man. Especially concerning Hogan and Patterson. When we get down here to some stuff, we're going to talk about Hogan involved in the AWA and stuff like that. So that was just some odds and ends that I found that I wanted to share with you that wasn't on our notes there. But anyway, well, you want to start us off with what we're going to talk about on our top 10?
Yeah, real quick.
How do you want to go from here?
Yeah, before we do that, real quick, I want to say that originally when Roy Shire closed up here in California, I think Pat Patterson and Ray Stevens, I mean, they floated like to the NWA briefly, but I think they joined with Bobby Heenan and Nick Bockwinkel. And I think Pat Patterson was originally with that group before he left to go do other things. I think.
Okay.
I'd have to look into it.
I think you're right now you're saying it, yes.
I think. Okay, well, number 10, this is one of the things that stood out to me while we were doing research on territories. There were two major closures in 1981. And one of them was right here in San Francisco. Roy Shire closed up Big Time Wrestling. He immediately had an interview with the local newspaper or TV station where he let out that wrestling was a work. He was fucking pissed about something. Because after years in the industry, he just shit all over it. Which I have to imagine it was probably Vern that set him off, but I can't say 100%. But also down in Amarillo, the Funks closed up shop that same year.
Back to the big time in San Francisco. Now, you're going to find out more about this in the future. I don't want to give too much away, but I heard from a very reliable resource that Roy Shire came through Ashland, Kentucky in 1954. Mm-hmm. The year that a young lady graduated. I know her maiden name. She was at the matches, and she married Roy Shire and moved to San Francisco. I don't know if they immediately moved there, but that was his. I don't know if it was his only wife, but that's his first wife.
Really?
Yeah. And should be coming out about. Just happened to someone sent me a couple questions that knew where I lived at, and I was from Ashland. They said, "Hey, you have any information about this?" And I really didn't, but I do know the basic premise of the story, that he came through for wrestling and married a young lady from Ashland, Kentucky, and I guess they never came back here either. I'm saying it wasn't. There was other companies that came through here. I don't know who he would have been working for then in ¡54, but yeah. That's pretty cool, I thought.
Oh.
And then for the Funks to shut down, and that was in 1981. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's they had been going to Japan quite a bit, but that's when they were really staying really busy in Japan, as well as Terry doing a lot of stuff with still doing stuff with the NWA. Been involved, just involved in wrestling overall. So they may have shut that territory down, but they certainly stayed involved in wrestling and didn't expose the business any, other than Terry maybe retiring 23 times or what have you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's not real common, at least not that I'm aware of. Usually when a promoter stops promoting, they just kind of shut up and go away. But Roy Shire, he just shit the bed, man. He just if I'm going, everybody's fucking going with me. But I also know that 1981 was the start of what they called the Reagan recession, where our economy, we were coming out of a bad one already with Carter,
right,
where we had stagflation, but it actually, a lot of people forget this, it got worse under Reagan initially.
Yeah, the Reaganomics.
Yep.
Trickle down effect of politics there and money, yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that, and I'd like to see somebody graph this at some point, it looks to me like when the economy's on the up, wrestling goes up, and when the economy goes down, wrestling goes down. And so if that holds, if that held water, that would explain why you would have two major closures or more, because we don't know what smaller companies would have went out around this time.
Right, yeah.
But that would explain why companies are folding right about then.
Very, very, very possible. Very possible. So, interesting. And I'm sure there's probably, some smaller companies that Outlaw maybe tried to open up and also shut down,
Oh, so, I'm sure, yeah.
Guys looking for work, starting, maybe not starting promotion, but trying to run some kind of a show just to, get some money coming in or what have you.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I know that by this point, Vern was running shows in Oakland and San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you got to remember, maybe our younger listeners don't remember this. The AWA was gigantic at this point. It was pro wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man, they covered the map, man.
Yeah.
They really did. They really did. That's interesting, too. When you look at that, some of the places they went to, just around Iowa and up there in Minnesota, just all the cold places. Then they go all the way out west like that. They went some up into Canada, I guess. It's just... there's probably some pretty harsh road trips back then.
Oh, man. There had to have been.
I know that they just had to be horrific road trip through snowstorms and over mountains and around the hills to Grandma's house we go, Mm-hmm. So those guys got out there and done it.
Well, and a lot of those roads were still older roads back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Before toll roads and all that shit and quadruple lanes and yeah. Well, let's keep moving on here and let's talk about world championships.
Yeah.
Well, let's just talk about championships. I forgot I threw one in here because it wasn't world, or two in here that aren't world but are still interesting. So over in the WWF at this point, Bob Backlund was still dominant, but old Vince was on his way out at this point. This is where he starts cycling down. But Bob Backlund was in year number 4 of a 6-year reign at this point?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And I without looking, I thought, okay, 81, I said Backlund had to be champion there. That was a pretty easy one, because I knew he had that run then.
Oh, yeah.
The next one I thought was really interesting. Well, the next two are actually pretty interesting. Not that Backlund being WWF, whatever, champion is not interesting, because I'm sure he had pretty good matches. I know he had a good angle with Greg Valentine at one time at Madison Square Garden. Referee raised the wrong hand, I think, and awarded the belt to Valentine, some controversy, stuff like that. But these next two, the NWA and AWA. Let's go with AWA first. That was pretty much a battle between Bockwinkel and Hogan.
Yes.
I wasn't sure. In my mind, I went like, okay, probably Bockwinkel held this title in 81. That's where I started my research from, just from my memory going, Bockwinkel. And then when I looked it up, it took me to Hogan, and you tell us a little bit about what took place there, because you really know this area well. What was going back and forth here? Yeah,
and we'll get into how Bockwinkel became world champion at this point. But so Bockwinkel and Hogan had a feud, and we're going to get into how that came about as well too. Here in a bit. Yeah. But throughout the next couple of years, as Hulkamania, which was really created by the Gagnes, as it began to run wild, there were a number of matches where Hulk Hogan appeared to beat Bockwinkel for the world title, only for Stanley Blackburn to come out and throw the match out, pissing off the crowd every single time. But also, pissing off Hogan as it went too.
Right.
1981 was really the start of that, but it continued over the next few years, and it is a major set of events in the future of pro wrestling from this point.
Absolutely. And we'll talk more about that in depth as we keep on down through here.
Yeah.
Now, for the NWA, I wasn't quite sure, and as I found out, it was a bit more than I thought it was, because I knew Harley Race was the champion, and he had that was his 5th title reign, but I knew this happened. I didn't know the exact day, but Tommy Rich beat him on April 27th for his first title reign.
Yep.
So I knew that, so I was thinking, okay, Tommy Rich, Harley Race and Tommy Rich, that's 2 champions from 81. And I skipped ahead, and I was thinking, there's someone else who I'm going to get to in a second. He also won a title, I think that was his first win. But anyway, so the way it goes, Race wins it for his 6th time over Tommy Rich on May 1st. He holds the title until June 21st, when Dusty beats him for his 2nd title reign. And then on September 17th, Ric Flair beats Dusty and begins his first title reign. So, man, we had a lot of changes just in that 1 year. Oh, God, excuse me, my ears popping. Man, sorry if I talk too loud there. Yeah,
that's
just, the NWA right there, you see Race beating Rich. Let's see. Rich beating Race, Race beating Rich, Dusty beating
Race,
and then Flair beating Dusty. All that, man. So some top guys in there, man. That just all of them top guys, of course, but just that many title reigns. We're going to start with April. So from April through September. So that's just we got April, May, June, July, August. Just in a 6-month time period.
Yeah.
Of the year of 1981, there's 6 different title changes.
Yeah,
so that's pretty wild,
and that was kind of
rare.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that's pretty uncommon back then.
Yeah, exactly.
And this also, I believe this is where Tommy Rich's taste for booze came from, because You got to get the taste of dick out of your mouth somehow, right? I mean, come on.
Oh, now come on. Why you want to give Tommy a hard time? Someone say something about some fried chicken, cold beer.
You know what? I don't mean to give Tommy Rich a hard time. I have to address those rumors that come up.
Now, Mr. Barnett was good to me. Now I'm gonna tell you, and I'm gonna tell you this here on April 20th. I didn't say it. Harley's good people. Harley's just good people, man. And Mr. Barnett was just good to me. Let's go to Granny's house before we go through the hood here, and let's get some fried chicken and cold beer.
Oh man. Okay. I'm gonna get tears in my eyes here in a second. Oh, well, another thing I came across, I thought this was really interesting, and I don't know.
Yeah, so there we covered AWA, WWF, and NWA, and then here's what you found interesting, and I like this too, where you're going to next year, now that you're done laughing at Tommy Rich.
Oh, well, it wasn't so much laughing at Tommy Rich as laughing with him.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. NWA Pacific Northwest, which a lot of people probably now, if you didn't know about it, was a gigantic territory back in the day. It put it with Florida even, maybe. That's where Buddy Rose came out of there. Roddy Piper came out of there. A lot of big names. And this year, in 1981, I don't know if it was because business was hot or cold.
Yeah.
But the NWA Pacific Northwest title turned over 1 million times, Bobby. I'm going to list these real quick, okay?
Right.
Now, all of this is just in 1981. Jay Youngblood held the title 5 times. Buddy Rose held the title 5 times. The Destroyer held it once. Matt Bourne held it once. Our friend Mr. Electricity Steve Regal held it twice. And our other friend Vacated held it 3 times.
Yeah. Vacated. Hope you're doing good out there, man. Mm-hmm. I am vacated 3 times.
That's right. That's 17 title changes in a year.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know if you call that hotly contested or if they just kept turning people over. Or...
I wonder if 2 questions come to mind. I'm thinking about this. I wonder if some of those guys were coming in and out of the territory. Namely, the Destroyer there, him coming in and back out, and maybe Regal too, because he tried. I don't know, but see the other 3 that seems with Buddy Rose, Jay Youngblood, and Matt Bourne, they seem to stay up in that area quite a bit. And I'm just wondering if the other guys were traveling over to Japan or were doing some other work. For some other NWA territories, or what was going on. Like Youngblood could have been over to Carolinas,
Yeah.
But if you come back every time they was getting the title back when I'm not so sure what was taking place. And then again, you mentioned the economy. You're talking about the Pacific Northwest up there. Like you said, to be a little bit redundant, you don't know if it's because the territory is hot or because it was cold. Were they trying to pop it or, let's see, put it on Jay again because, he had it a couple weeks ago and we, drew a couple thousand more people. Let's do this. I don't know. So if anyone out there knows, fill us in, man.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's an answer.
Yeah, well, and I wonder Rock Rims may have written something about this already or is working on a book about it. But, I'd be interested in seeing that because, also, and not to get too far out ahead of ourselves or over our skis, 1982 is when L.A. closes up shop. And L.A., San Francisco, Portland all were kind of a loop back in the day.
Yeah.
With Hawaii in there as well. But I wonder if, the pressures here on the West Coast were just a lot worse than I remember. I remember building, because my dad was a plumber, I remember building was in the shits at this point,
Yeah.
I'm going to hit this real quick. So Nick Bockwinkel became the AWA World Champion when Vern Gagne retired that year. They just gave him the title. Because he's Bockwinkel, greatest world champion of all time. You just give it to him. That's how you handle that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that would set the stage for Triple H just being handed a world championship eventually as well. But
yeah.
And then one other thing about San Francisco I discovered. I found this to be really interesting. Now, I knew Dusty Rhodes was the U.S. champion out here in this territory at one point.
Yeah, you've mentioned that before.
Yeah. But what I didn't realize is that he was U.S. champion when it folded here. which made him the last U.S. champion for NWA Big Time Wrestling in San Francisco. But it also was the last U.S. title not under Jim Crockett's control.
Okay.
So after Dusty folds with that title, Jim Crockett now controls the last standing U.S. title in the NWA. And at a point, every territory of the NWA had a U.S. champion. And at this point, just one does. So I found that to be really interesting as well, because we're going to run into that again too. All right.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Number 8, Andre the Giant. Couple things about Andre. I did not know this, and I don't know if you did or not, but, being wrestling fans that we are, I didn't know what Feud of the Year would have been in 1981, and if you'd have said this was Feud of the Year to me, I would have to just say, okay, let me have some facts about it, you know what I'm saying? Because I was not aware of this being the biggest, heated angle of 1981, but apparently it was. It was May the 2nd, Killer Khan breaks Andre's left ankle to be what would become the Feud of the Year.
Yeah.
Now, that was in May. Do you recall anything about this at all? Magazines, had TV, anything at all about that? I don't. I really don't.
No,
Okay.
Just stuff like this where I'm sure we've come across that or read that somewhere.
Right.
I knew Andre the Giant had a broken ankle angle somewhere,
Right.
but I didn't remember any specifics about it.
Right, myself as well. And then they take that through, what is that, June, July, August, September, October. 6 months later, on November 2nd, Andre wins in a Mongolian stretcher match to end the feud. The match took place at the Spectrum in Philadelphia. Now, they had that on some kind of a it wasn't a pay-per-view, but
Closed
they did
circuit.
something.
Yeah.
It was kind of a closed circuit. I did read that also. I'm not sure what kind of business they did. So I guess they were working some, maybe in April. Then in May, Khan breaks the ankle. He comes back in 6 weeks or whatever. They work it over a 6-month period for Andre. Now, I found this, I'm not sure. Does a Mongolian stretcher look anything like, stretchers they carry out here in American hospitals, or was it a special stretcher?
I believe Mongolian stretchers are made out of horsehide, I'm pretty sure.
Well, I was wondering that, and I was wondering how if they just, two big Mongolian men just come out and pulled it like, I don't know. I just found that fascinating. A Mongolian stretcher match.
Yeah, I love, everything is so regionalized in pro wrestling when they do this stuff. It's not a strap match, it's an Indian strap match. It's not a death match, it's a Texas death match. It's not just everything's got to be.
Not a strap match, is a lumberjack match.
Exactly, yeah. They
This
always
can't just be a stretcher match, Andre and Khan. You guys are going to do something very special. You're going to have a Mongolian stretcher match.
I always found the Mongolians a very interesting people. I mean, the older days of the Mongolians, because their warriors basically at the age of 3 got tied to horseback and they'd live there for a while. And they had a move called the Mongolian retreat, which is they would send their guys out to engage like at lance range, right? So horse to horse.
Okay.
And then they would signal a retreat, so all their guys would then turn around and haul ass off. Well, the Mongolians made a fucking powerful short bow. So the Mongolians would ride off, the other guys thinking they had the advantage would take to chasing them, and then the Mongolians would all turn around in the saddle and fire arrows into the people following them. And they couldn't do shit but get tangled up on the people in the back row behind them, so the Mongolians would just slaughter them.
Damn.
And that's part of how, you get that, Genghis Khan created the largest contiguous land empire ever in human history. Part of that was because the land was empty, but the other part was because people didn't know how to fight against a tactic like that.
Yeah.
You think you've got the advantage, you rush in, well, then all your men are slaughtered. So a group of like 10,000 people could take on a group of 500,000 and would stomp their ass. I always found that interesting.
That is, yeah. And that's why you're a professor too, by God.
Well, I love pro wrestling and military history. Those are my two fields of study, yeah.
Another interesting thing about Andre, on December 21st, the Sports Illustrated that came out that week done a piece on Andre the Giant, and up until that time, it was the largest article about professional wrestling, a professional wrestler up until that point. I thought that's pretty interesting. And then the other big thing was Andre and Stan Hansen had a battle to a no contest in Tokyo on December 23rd. So not sure what the timing was on the 21st article in relation to his big fight with having Feud of the Year and with having Wrestle Mainstream, basically a mainstream sports magazine.
Yeah.
And then also just a couple of days later going to be in Tokyo. I imagine it took place at the Tokyo Dome or what have you. With Stan Hansen. So that's pretty interesting. So as you can see, with all these different champions we've mentioned up through here, and we've talked about this before, Andre's still so over. He doesn't need the title anywhere. He's just Andre the Giant, and he's traveling throughout the world apparently, and getting worldwide coverage on Sports Illustrated, etc. So that's pretty interesting, man.
It is. And first off, you got to say, like, a match in Japan between Andre and Stan Hansen, that had to sell fucking half the tickets to the event alone. Because they were both, Stan Hansen was so over in Japan anyways. But then Andre is just such a draw, just such a feature to have on your show. That had to have been just a wild, wild thing. I can't say there's probably a lot of great wrestling in that match, though. Probably not a lot of mat maneuvers, probably not a lot of pretzel holds and standing scorpion locks and things, yeah. Probably a lot of chops, slaps, and clotheslines, though.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
I'd
say it's very respectable selling, I would say.
Oh, I would imagine, yeah, because these are two guys that, that's...
And you got to remember, Andre could move at one time, so I would imagine it's pretty good match. Pretty good match, just not a lot of technique wrestling, like you said.
Well,
technical wrestling. But,
that's not what either one of those guys did. They were brawlers, yeah. God damn it. And can you imagine just how much taller they were than everybody in the audience, just those two guys,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Let's keep going. Let's talk about tag teams. So number 7 is tag teams that year.
Yes.
Over at the AWA at the start of the year, Adrian Adonis and Jesse Ventura were the tag team champions, but they'd go on to lose them to Jim Brunzell and Greg Gagne.
Yeah, about that time, I used to see some AWA on the old Memphis tapes. And also I read the magazines, and I would imagine those guys there probably want to cover some of the ones I didn't find. Like I said, I can imagine, because I know the Adonis and Jesse Ventura, I knew there was a tag team in '81. I do remember that. I don't remember them losing to Brunzell or Greg Gagne there. It was just because maybe to me, at the time, maybe, there was so much more colorful Ventura and Adonis were. What were they? The
East-West connection?
East-West connection, something like that, yeah. And Adonis had the biker look going back then, tough guy, as Jesse was just, had the body, Frank was in pretty good shape. Adrian Adonis was in pretty good shape. He wasn't blown up completely like he had, But I remember them being AWA champions, but I don't recall, that, and it might be because they put them on Memphis a couple of times, highlights or something, what was going on around the loop there or something. But and then Brunzell and Greg Gagne, so they were. What were they? Did they have a special name?
They were the High Flyers, I want to say.
That's what I was going to say. No, because I'm getting that name, High Flyers. I'm getting it mixed up. I'm thinking of what was Bobby Eaton and what's his name? Georgie. Were they? Anyway, I'm getting mixed up on that. They had a name, I know that. But anyway,
it was the High Flyers, Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I was just getting that mixed up for somewhere. And the other were East-West connection, right?
Yep.
Okay, good deal. And moving over to the WWF, who we have there?
All right, so that year, 1981, we had the Moondogs, and then Rick Martel and Tony Gurria, and then Fuji and Saito.
Yeah. Now, if you'd asked me who would have been there, I had forgotten about, and I think they had a pretty good run with Martel and Gurria, but I would have thought the Moondogs would have still been in Memphis, to be honest with you. So I would have missed that one. But Fuji and Saito, I could see them being, champions up there. Even though, I know all three of them were, it just seemed like in my mind I was thinking the Moondogs were, that was out of Memphis area, so I wasn't sure they would have been up to the New York area at that time,
Yeah.
That's my only reasoning. Nothing against it or anything. I just recall them being more to Memphis and seeing them on that TV, and not so much because I didn't get that WWF TV back in the day. But all those are great guys, great talents,
Oh yeah, but you're right. If you were to ask me just off the top of my head, hey, who do you think would have been tag team champion 81 WWF or whatever? I would have literally been like, you got me, man. I don't know.
Then if there's multiple choice, I'd have chose Fuji and Saito. But
yeah, probably.
So, okay, this is your specialty area here, man, is the NWA, how it gets a bit messier here. So what's going on here with the NWA titles, tag team titles? Because we've got a couple of interesting things.
So, as we have covered here a time or two, every NWA territory was allowed to have their own United States champion and their own World Tag Team champions.
Mm-hmm.
So as of 1981, that was still the case. So it's a little hard to track because you have Georgia Championship Wrestling, you have Los Angeles, you have Mid-Atlantic. So you have a number of World Tag Team Champions, and you have them at the same time. So it's hard to track. So the problem is, like, you and I are doing research, and we come up with two different names for each area and territory. You're going to be like, well, which of these guys were the Tag Team Champions? But what I did discover was that all came to an end in 1982. So 1981 is the last year where that was the case. In 1982, when Los Angeles folded, much like the U.S. title when San Francisco folded, that meant the only existing World Tag Team Championships were Jim Crockett's in the Mid-Atlantic. So that holds that spot. But for Bobby, for me and you, who was the greatest Tag Team Champions that year?
Oh, the Freebirds.
That's right, the Freebirds.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Freebirds. I'm not sure we got all this even in the research. Okay, so the Freebirds were over in Georgia, and they had those championship belts.
Mm-hmm.
And then apparently on Thanksgiving evening for a NWA over in the Mid-Atlantic, they had a tournament, and they beat, it said Ole and Arn, but I'm pretty sure I think that should have been Gene, right? You correct me on that.
I know.
I just know the way it read,
Yeah. Now maybe that's
one. So
yeah.
That's what we was going with.
Exactly, and maybe that's the year that Gene retired, and so you start the year with Ole and Gene, and then end with Ole and Arn. That could very well be, but
that may have been the bleed over right there. But either way, we looked at it at that point saying the Freebird because they had won Georgia and they had won a Mid-Atlantic, and that kind of started. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, too, those were the belts. They had belts. That was it had been a trophy at some point.
Mm-hmm.
In several, maybe not all regions, but in that one region, it was a trophy. And
exactly.
That was they gave them belts. So we'll go up to Freebird to take that spot for NWA for that year and leave it at that,
Yeah.
And you can correct us if we're wrong. And feel free to just hit me up at Bobby Blaze 744 on Twitter. Hit the professor up at the Geekish Cast on Twitter, or look at the joint account, which is Bell to Bell Blaze on Twitter, and my ears are ringing right now, and I swear I'm just like, so I hope everyone understood what I was getting at there. It's not that we want to be wrong, but if we miss something, we like to have some fan interaction, and we appreciate you when you do get a hold of us on that fan interaction. I know there's a Facebook page out there also called Bell to Bell Blaze that Jeremy takes a look at from now and again, but I mostly stay on Twitter and go from there. And if something comes up, we do like fan interaction. We had a couple ideas for shows this week. Sometimes they're good ones. Sometimes we're just like indifferent on them. And but we do get a lot of good feedback on those on our Twitter accounts, and we appreciate that very much. So let us know who you might have. I think our fans wouldn't argue too much if they said, well, Bobby and Jeremy picking a free berth for tag team 1981 probably wasn't too far off, So anyway,
yeah, I would think that our audience would definitely go along with that, unless there's maybe one or two holdouts that we just don't know about out there,
right?
And maybe those are the guys who don't hit us up on Twitter because they're like, if I can't say something nice, I'm just not going to say anything.
Yeah, and we appreciate that, man. We appreciate that. But you have your own opinions, and feel free to share them.
Mm-hmm. Well,
all right.
Let's go on to the next here. We're going to handle a couple. We're just real quick.
Yeah.
We talk about a couple people that would be eventually involved in the industry who were born in 1981. And honestly, this list was really long. I just grabbed a handful of names off the top.
Right, I saw it too.
Yeah. But, Shad Gaspard, who passed away last year, he was born in 1981. Daniel Bryan, I would say a guy who was poised to be the biggest name in pro wrestling there for a couple years. He was born in 81. Velvet Sky. What can I say about Velvet Sky? Well, she was born in 1981. Kofi Kingston was born in 1981. Velvet Sky's tag team partner, Angelina Love, was born that year. And Asuka was born that year as well.
Yeah. A lot of talent right there, man.
A whole lot of talent.
Yeah.
And my apologies to anybody I didn't include on the list. I just didn't want to go on for days with a list.
Yeah, it was quite a list. I saw that. The one that stuck out to me when I was looking at it was Daniel Bryan. Actually, Shad stuck out right away because of his recent story where he passed away.
Yeah.
But Daniel Bryan and then Kofi Kingston, because I think they're both tremendous performers. Not to take anything away from any of those three girls you listed, three female wrestlers there, because they're all very talented as well. Asuka's just in a league of her own, man. But so you picked out the ones that would have. Not to discriminate against anyone we didn't add on there. That was just some names that really have had some outstanding careers. In the wrestling in their years. So, all being born way back in 1981.
Yeah, the very long.
That's 40 years ago, folks.
I know. It's unbelievable. Daniel Bryan, I mean, it's almost a fucking shame what happened to him, Just because, he goes from being a big dog in ROH, signs with the WWE and just gets shit on for years. Finally, they let him get a grasp on things, and they're like, oh, yeah, but now you have a brain injury, so, sorry, man. Then they let him come back when he's 40. Okay, all right. Thanks, everybody. Kofi Kingston, there's a lot of fucking talent. I've slept on this guy pretty hard. I don't give him credit when I should. But, walking on your hands and shit and never touching the ground in those Battle Royal matches, the dude is just class act. I mean, he is just outstanding. For sure. And then Asuka, an argument could be made that she's one of the top 5 wrestlers of this generation. Yeah,
that's true. That's true. Very talented, talented. And the thing about that is just mentioning her age.
Mm-hmm.
When I said that's 40 years ago. And she's been on the scene, just in the U.S. here the last few years or whatever. It really amazes me how good she looks, how good she moves, how well she takes care of herself,
Oh, yeah.
She's one of the ones on here that, not that I know any of the other ones other than Daniel Bryan had the injury there. She's just, Asuka just looks a lot younger than that and still very athletically just moves a lot younger, I think, than a 40-year-old person, Well, I would never guess that based off her in-ring performances, to be honest with you.
That is something that I actually like to talk about a little bit, because remember back in the 90s, like in your heyday, right? They were like, oh, Hogan and Flair are too fucking old, and the WWF had this whole skit they do about how old everybody was.
Yeah.
They were all younger than AJ Styles is now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like by a good number of years. Okay. Look at all these people in their 40s who are fucking still in great shape, still look great. I mean, I wouldn't guess Velvet Sky's 40.
No.
You know, Kofi Kingston, wouldn't guess that he's 40. Daniel Bryan, I'd say, like, in my head, if I looked at him, I'd think he's maybe 35.
Right. I agree with you. I would go 35 or younger for all these people, but just looking at them for the way they take care of themselves.
Yeah.
I know a couple things come to mind. Carl Gotch always said that between a wrestler between 35 and 45 is the best. That's the prime of their life.
Yep.
And because, you know, you're getting to know the business all those years, you're maturing in the business. You know, obviously if you're staying injury free like you should and working all the different, at that time, territories and stuff, you know, you're going to know your craft in 10 years like that, you know. And I know on Cornette's podcast they was talking about, I just caught a piece of it, the man that you would put on there in her being 45 years old, who would you choose to represent, you know, wrestling at a 45-year-old? Terry Funk, which I'm a fan of Terry Funk, of course, but or Nick Bockwinkel, and I think Bockwinkel was the obvious answer, man. When Bockwinkel was 45 years old, man, he just looked so great, could work great. Even at 50, man, that guy just, you know, those 5 years right there, 45 to 50-year-olds. Bockwinkel was the man, you know. Yeah. And I don't know, so just poise, self-poise, interview, ring work, everything about him, you know, just at that point, that's a good age to be at for these guys. I mean, I don't see why, other than Shad, and I don't mean as a joke or anything like that, I don't see why any of the other ones on that list can't stay another, you know, 10 years in the business, as probably 5 to 7 years as performers, but also with, you know, behind the scenes stuff, production maybe, booking, you know, agents, some of the you know, things they have going on now, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, you know, and another thing is, I think people a generation or two before these guys, okay, so before people who are about 40 now, I think they lived a lot harder, you know, 20, 25, 30, 40 years ago. You know, because, like, look at Harley Race. I mean, Harley Race would wrestle, you know, for an 8-hour day, drive for 4 hours, drink a 20-pack of beer, and smoke 5 packs of cigarettes.
Yeah.
You know, fucking nobody smokes anymore, really. You know, Daniel Bryan, he's a vegan, so obviously he eats better than anybody did 25 years ago. You know, you just look at everybody there, they just, I imagine, probably take better care of themselves than, you know, everybody else. You know, think about, like, Ric Flair. Fucking only half his heart was working, but he was in such good cardiovascular health, it still pumped twice as much blood as anybody else. Yeah. You know? Incredible. Yeah. Incredible.
All right, man. Let's move on here to number 5, which is the PWI Editor's Choice Award for the first time that year went to Bruno Sammartino. That has since been named to an editor, and I'm drawing a blank. When I was doing my research, I did not write it down. But let's go through some categories here. So they do have an Editor Choice Award every year since this was the first year he did it in '81. But let's just talk about who the Wrestler of the Year was, Tag Team of the Year, Match of the Year, etc. According to PWI here, Professor.
All right. Well, let's start with the Wrestler of the Year was Ric Flair.
Yes.
Of course, this was the year he would go on to win his first NWA title, so he must have been like a 30-time U.S. champion by this point.
Yeah, since he won that match in September, you have to imagine he came on strong at the end, obviously, for the last quarter or whatever. But you got to wonder, you know, in between there, how busy he was staying, getting ready to get that first championship belt. You know. Yeah. I would imagine he was having some very good matches with Harley, Dusty, and a few other people in between. You know. And having, you know, 4- and 5-star matches, I would imagine, every night, and building up to those 45-minute and hour Broadways, building up to the September, whatever it was, 27th date or whatever it was. Yeah. So, yeah, Wrestler of the Year, Ric Flair.
Yeah, Yeah, and of course Ric Flair was the guy that, you know, when they call him the all-night man, they're not just talking about in the bedroom. They did go out and work all fucking day, stay up drinking and fucking all night, and then go out and work all day the next day, you know.
Yeah.
You know, so 1981 Tag Team of the Year for PWI was the Fabulous Freebirds, an excellent choice from PWI.
Yeah. And that was Michael Hayes and Terry Gordy. Buddy Jack hadn't come on at that point yet.
Mm-hmm.
But they were the Tag Team of the Year. Like you said, great choice for PWI. Now, we mentioned this a little bit earlier. Both of us were a little bit surprised. Only because maybe we didn't have, for whatever reason, maybe, I don't know why, we just didn't get the coverage that was out there available for this match, and that is Andre the Giant versus Killer Khan. That was the PWI match of the year. So there you go.
Yeah, and I mean, roll that one around in your head. Does that sound like the kind of match that would be like the match of the year now? I mean,
right. And again, we got to look at Andre being able to move back then.
Yep.
Like you talked about versus Hansen, and the same thing here against Khan. You know, they was probably doing a lot more than what we're giving them credit for. It might not have been the most technical wrestling, but there was some, you know, there was a lot of action and fighting and combat sport going on in the ring. So.
Oh yeah.
This one doesn't surprise me. If you'd asked me who it was, I could have probably guessed it because I was in high school then, and all the daggone little girls, man, and some of the big girls too. The most popular wrestler of the year, that was that blonde hair from Hendersonville, Tennessee, Tommy Wildfire Rich, man.
Yeah.
And I mean, even a few years ago, maybe, I don't even know in my head how many years it's been, but, you know, I'd had girls come up to me, ladies that come up to me and say, you travel with Tommy Rich? You got to know Tommy Rich? And, you know, I'm a lady about 40 years old probably. And I'm like, yeah. And they go, oh, my God, he was my high school crush, my dream guy. You know, I've had people tell me that before. So, yeah, and Tommy Rich, man, most popular the rest of the year, that does not surprised me one bit. And I know how over he was because we got the Georgia TV, of course, and of course that's when he got the title and everything. But they came to the Huntington and Charleston, this market, quite a bit, you know, a couple, 3 times a year on their loops up here. And he was, you know, pretty damn popular, man. So it'd been hard to beat him winning, anyone beating him for most popular wrestler of the year. So. Oh,
you know, and he had that Rock and Roll Express kind of popularity, that Von Erich Boys kind of popularity. Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, what are all those girls doing in the wrestling audience kind of popularity? You know, they always talk about, and they had the matinee idol looks, which was kind of an older, that's like a late 60s concept, but, you know, They were definitely grooming him for a style and a look. And, you know, probably much like Goldberg, when you get something that hot that breaks away, you put the title on it just to see what happens.
Yeah.
Like, fight, you don't know. That thing could be the biggest thing that ever happens. You don't know.
I know. I don't know if this was 81. I think it was. I'm almost positive it was. The NWA came, I think, Georgia Championship Wrestling came to the old Memorial Fieldhouse. And Tommy Rich had, I guess, forgotten his gear and his gimmicks. I don't know what was going on with him. But anyway, man, he come to the ring, hit the ring. Might have been a street fight or something. His wife forgot his stuff because he had his jeans boots and doing the stuff with Buzzsaw back then, Buzz Sawyer or whatever. But anyway, he had a trucker's hat, and they auctioned that off and got like $45 out of it or something. But that was his gimmick money that night for his beer, you know.
Right on.
The hat that he wore to ring, you know, to come to the street brawl, he wasn't selling merch, but they did an in-ring auction, and like I said, it's just an old, you know, baseball cap, trucker's hat, whatever you want to call it. And I think they got like $45 out of it, and I'm sure he was happy as hell, you know.
Oh yeah, $45 will buy a lot of beer.
Oh yeah,
and chicken wings, yeah.
There you go. All right, so who was the most hated wrestler of the year?
Well, that would be the strongest man in the world, Ken Patera.
Yeah. So if you go 81 in my mind, Patera, like I said, he's on cover of the magazine on February of that year against Morales. So apparently, you know, he had done quite a bit of nasty, hateful things that year to be the most hated wrestler of the year. So he hadn't thrown any bricks through McDonald's yet.
But, not yet, but he was working up to it.
Nodding this back in '81 to be the most hated Kempatera.
Yeah.
Found this one fascinating. We talked about this off the air last week because this is one of the ones you threw out at me.
Yes.
If I'd have said to you, almost kind of like you said to me last week, and you only read like two of these to me, and I said, yeah, let's do it. If you'd have said, Bobby, who do you think the most popular, or I'm going to ask you, Jeremy, who's the most improved wrestler of the year in 1981? Would you have guessed the name we're going to tell?
No, I would not have, because I
would not have either.
Yeah, he was quite a bit into his career. I wouldn't expect it. And do you want me to say who it was? Well,
I'm going to put it this way. Everyone out there in our listening audience, wrestling fans, raise your hand if you think you know who the most improved wrestler of the year was in 1981. And when the professor tells you, go ahead and put your hand down if you got it wrong.
All right. So that would be the not satanic Kevin Sullivan.
Yeah. Now, how many people still have their hand up? Man, he was well into his career at that point.
Yeah.
And here he is still most improved wrestler of the year. That's pretty damn good, man. Man given to his craft, you know.
Yeah, and you think about it, I mean, we've all seen Kevin Sullivan. I don't think he ever sucked at his job. I mean, I don't think that's the case at all here.
And the thing is, he kept on improving even after his 81. You're talking about he improved as a booker.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, his mind is one of the greatest, I think, ever. Him and Cornette, to me, had two of the greatest minds in professional wrestling for running angles and doing business and stuff. But yeah, this is 81. Hell, Sullivan went on to a lot more of. I think he kept improving through the years.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, he's lived in like Portland for like 25 years now, and he still has that Pak de Ka and Harvard Yard accent. I think that's amazing too. Well, let's talk about the most inspirational wrestler that year.
Yeah. 81, I'm thinking, to me, I'm seeing probably a lot more, Memphis and some Georgia championship. So I don't know what he done to get this, but it was probably because he's working for, the Northeast Territory up there. Don't know why he's the most inspirational, but it was Bob Backlund, man.
Yeah.
He had a great career. What'd you say? He was in by this time in 81. That's his fourth year as the champion.
Yeah. And with 2 to go.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's inspiring that he was still the champion after those 4 years, or just his work ethic. Because the man had a work ethic, man, and was in tremendous shape. Done his howdy doody interviews, or however you want to call them. It's not a dig towards him, just saying it wasn't like it was overly. He was just a baby face, that all American good guy baby face that was over, and stayed over. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I have to imagine, just because he was still like only a handful of years off from being the Olympic hero. And now he'd had this lock on the title, and he's the next biggest champion compared to Bruno, I have to imagine, at this point. It makes me wonder if there was something going on story-wise or in his real life that had the most inspirational thing. Yeah. The next one, I'm thinking somebody got paid off for this one, Bobby.
Yeah, I tell you what we should have done, too, and I apologize to you. I know we both had kind of quirky weeks. We talked about that off the air. This Rookie of the Year, I'm wondering who else broke in 81 that could have gotten this title for PWI Rookie of the Year. But as you said, we only mentioned 2 last week, and that was the most improved with Sullivan. And then this one you're here because you said what you just now said, that someone's paid off.
Yep.
David Sarmatino. Not to take anything away from him, man, but man, he had some big shoes to fill to follow in his dad's footsteps. A lot of territory to cover. He had a big build. Definitely showed as a rookie. Even after his rookie year, he looked like still needed much more improvement. And I didn't do enough research to say, well, who else broke in 81? But anyway, that's who the Rookie of the Year was in 1981. And what are your thoughts about that? Same.
Okay, so just I don't know. Like, he should have chosen a different career path. I don't want to talk about his wrestling skill. Look, I'm not a wrestler. I can't really talk about that part of it. When your father is Bruno fucking Sammartino, and look, you were born here in the States, so you don't have quite the same ethnic Italian thing that you can lean on like Bruno did. You're not going to be as good in ring as Bruno was. You're never going to be like as strong as Bruno was. You're never going to be as fucking over. I don't care how much fucking grease Bruno puts on you. You should have used a different name, maybe, or gone and worked a different territory, maybe, or, you know, I mean, this is the thing that happens. I mean, you got to look at the Great Gagne. It's not that he was a bad wrestler, but he was always just smaller than everybody else. The Eric Watts, who just never was as good as he could have been, and David Sammartino, I'd say the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, change your name, go try something else. You know, like, look, Nicolas Cage is actually Nick Coppola, but he didn't want to get by on that. He changed his name. Now, the fact that he made such a career after such ham-fisted acting, that's the amazing part.
Right.
But absolutely. instead of riding coattails, he wanted to go and try something different. David Sammartino, probably, if he didn't work with his dad, he probably would have had to have stretched a little harder and tried a little harder and maybe improved a little more. Yeah. Because I'm sure fucking everybody's like, oh, don't fuck with him. That's Bruno's kid. You know?
And I'm just wondering, though, how much of his heart was in it, though. You know, I don't know. Obviously, he didn't want it as bad as his dad did, you know, being an immigrant coming here and working, you know, with the work ethic he had, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But maybe his heart just wasn't even in it. Maybe there was some pressure put on him. This is what you're supposed to do.
Oh, could
but
very
he had
well
other
be,
feelings like, you know, that's not really what I'm supposed to do. I'll give it a try, but I have other aspirations with my life, you know.
He's like, I want to dance, Dad. Don't make me wrestle.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. We mentioned this earlier. PWI's editor of the award that went to Bruno Sammartino. Again, they've named that after an editor of that magazine, and I'm drawing a blank on his name. And okay, so this one here, if you would ask me this one, I might have been 50-50 on a multiple choice. I'll say that. Manager of the year. Would you have known who it was?
No.
Okay. 81, I'm thinking I wouldn't have either. I'd have went with, you know, someone probably from the AWA or from the NWA or Georgia, someone I was more familiar with. But go ahead and tell us who it was there.
Well, Captain. It was Captain Lou Albano.
There you go.
Riding the rubber bands to the wind. But for me, I would have said like Bobby Heenan.
Yeah. That's who come to my mind first.
Johnny Valiant. And Johnny Valiant, maybe Arnold Skolland, maybe. Mm-hmm. Those would have been like
Skolland,
yeah. Those off the top of my head, those would have been my three.
Yeah.
How about you?
I'd have probably said Jimmy Hart probably and Bobby Heenan, those two.
Mm-hmm.
Right off the top of my head, you know. So yeah, that's 81. So yeah. Hart was, you know, doing pretty good in Mid-South then, and I'd seen Heenan around, so yeah, one of those two probably.
Yeah, and Heenan, AWA Heenan was a much bigger dick, evil maniac than he was when he got to the WWF. While he was still a bad guy and like an expert villain and heel, he was also comedy heel a lot.
Yeah.
Whereas
physical comedy too.
Yeah.
He could take those bumps like crazy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But when he was in the AWA, he was just a fucking heel.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and good at it. Now, Lou Albano, no slouch.
No.
He's never top of mind with me, you know, except for, like, hey, who was the best live-action version of Mario? Okay, that's Lou Albano.
Yeah. But, you know, he had the Samoans, man. He had the Samoans. I'm trying to think. So, yeah, I should probably put him up there higher than what I had him probably. He just didn't come to mind doing this. Okay, real quickly, Jeremy, before we go to number 4, I'm going to plug my books if you don't mind.
Oh, please do.
Folks, these books, hopefully, the professor here has got a couple of shortcuts to getting my books. My first book is called Pin Me, Pay Me, Have Boost Will Travel. If you'll go to tinyurl.com/blazebook1, it'll take you right to that book, and you can order it right there from the site off Amazon. The show does get a little bit of kickback. That's why we ask you to go through the sites that the professor has set up. And it kind of funds the program as little as we do fund the program. We appreciate it. My second book is I kicked out on two, The Educational Wrestler. If you'll go to tinyurl.com/blazebook2, it'll take you right to the link for that book. I get to sell a book. The affiliate account under the professor there gets a couple dimes or nickels or whatever, and everyone smiles and everyone's happy, and I hope you enjoy the book when you read it. I've got a couple other books on Amazon as well. They're short stories, little $2.99 short story books there. One's about Christmas, one's about yard time, running a wrestling show in a prison, and one's a little erotic romance type book, just trying a different genre on my site there. But please do us a favor and visit those sites. tinyurl.com/blazebook1 will get you Pin Me, Pay Me. tinyurl.com/blazebook2 will take you to I Kicked Out on Two, The Educational Wrestler. Please leave a review if you've enjoyed one of my books, and also if you're enjoying this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to it at, please feel free to leave us a fair and honest review there as well. We appreciate it very much. And make sure you tell a friend. We really need those retweets. We need those reviews. And we appreciate all you do as a wrestling fan listening to our podcast, because we think, minus a few F-bombs here and there, and we haven't been too bad today, we got a pretty good podcast, and I think our loyal fans know that. So we appreciate you all very much. Anything,
much.
Professor?
No, I think we're gonna try to add to the library a little bit this year, but we're still kind of working things out, so we'll deal with that when we can. And please, everybody, if you don't have it yet, go buy Bobby's book. If you know somebody who is a wrestling fan who would enjoy it, buy it for them if you already have it. And that's what I have to say about that.
Okay, my ears keep popping, so I try to ramble through that pretty quick, so I hope I was understandable.
I got to say you're holding up pretty well, because I've had water in my ear before, and it's a motherfucker, so thank you for hanging in so far.
Yeah, so far so good. I finished up a little bit of orange drink I had. I've got some water here. I keep trying to pop it. I keep trying to turn my head. My neck cracked there for a second ago. That kind of relieved it on that one side. So hopefully by the time we get off here, I'm going to put some heat on there or what have you. Yeah. But I don't think it's anything to be concerned about, people. I'm tougher than that, or I like to think I am. I don't know. Maybe I used to be.
Talking about a guy who beat Jerry Lawler, but it's going to be an ear infection makes you cry, huh?
That's it, man. Yeah, tap out to that. That's no laughing matter for sure.
Really isn't. Ear infections are the shits, man.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to number 4 here. Professor put this in here: retirements and deaths that took place in 1981. I'm not going to guess where all these people were born, what year they were born, although Professor got down, but I can tell you one thing. I think they all passed away in 1981.
They all passed away in 1981, and actually those years are the starts of their careers.
Oh, okay, is that it is? Okay,
yeah, so you'll notice everybody's got a 30 to 40 year career here.
Okay, yeah, I see now.
Yeah, Black Shadow, he had a 40 year career. He retired that year. Tony Bourne had a 30 year career, retired that year. Probably the biggest name on this list for our purposes is going to be Vern Gagne, retired in 1981. Retired as AWA World Champion, which led to them handing the world title to Nick Bockwinkel. But again, he's Nick Bockwinkel. If you're going to hand the title to somebody, it's him.
That's right.
Dutch Savage retired that year, had a 20-year career. So there's the one short-timer on the list. Mm-hmm. And the Missouri Mauler retired that year, 1950 to 1981, a 31-year career.
Yeah. Amazing.
The biggest death I came across that year, at least for our purposes, was Killer Buddy Austin down in L.A. He was WWA World Champion in Los Angeles. He was just one of those guys that was like for 20, 25 years, he was just like a name down there and continuously, continuously went up against people for the WWA World Championship, which there was a version in L.A. and a version in Detroit at this point, but I think the Detroit one had folded. And L.A. would fold the next year. So we got that. Now we got debuts and defections is the next one. And this is Okay, so I'm going to have to follow on this because this is the first name you put on this list, right?
Yeah.
Rookie of the Year, who premiered in 1981? Tiger Mask premiered in 1981. But who won Rookie of the Year? David Sammartino.
Yeah, so April 23rd of 1981, Tiger Mask debuts and defeats the Dynamite Kid. And, man, did they have some matches that really changed the way other wrestlers looked at the wrestling business, as did the fans.
Yeah.
They could do some stuff in the ring that had never been done before or seen before. But the way they did it, it made it still look like a combat sport. It wasn't just two guys flying around and whirly-dirling and twirling and doing flips and flops and all that. They were doing very competitive type aerial type moves and looked a little rough doing them, like they were struggling. Even though they could do them, they were struggling. The struggle was still on. Out of a top wrist lock to run over to the top rope to do a backflip to reverse it, things like that. It was done in a way that it still looked competitive and believable, So yeah, big debut there, and there's your Rookie of the Year, at least in Japan, maybe not PWI, but
yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah, now my voice is starting to go out.
That's all right. We're almost done.
Well, yeah, and okay, so Dynamite Kid, very.
Not that I want your voice to go out. I'm just saying we're almost done with our list.
But Dynamite Kid, very acrobatic, even though he was built. He had a heavy build. He was not like a slight guy. I mean, he had a big muscular build and could still move around like that.
Yeah.
Tiger Mask also not a little guy, but definitely it showed more with Dynamite Kid, I think. And there is a thing, they were some of the first guys who have matches like this, so it is going to look rougher. I mean, now, 40 years later, people can go back and watch Dynamite Kid and Tiger Mask and go, oh, I could do that better. Well, yeah, because there's been 40 years of continuous improvement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, that at the end of that year, stunningly, in December, at a Bruiser Brody match in All Japan, and Stan Hansen, the NJPW mainstay for Inoki, is Bruiser's corner man, and he stays at AJPW after this point. And this was just a stunning shift over there.
So he jumps from All Japan, from New Japan to All Japan at this point, correct?
Yep. From Inoki to Baba, yeah.
Yeah, and stays there the rest of his career. And later that month is when he had the match with Andre, correct?
Yes, it is.
December 23rd. So just they've already had a, who knows what kind of, I read the Last Outlaw, trying to think how those meetings took place, but he already had some things, pretty much lined up. It wasn't like, if I'm coming, we're going to do business, So here he is as Brody's corner man, and then also 10 days later from that, wrestling Andre the Giant.
Yeah.
So.
And one of the things that I think is amazing. Now, I came across some stories about Inoki this same year, and he was still carrying the NWF title, which was a defunct American title that he carried for 20 years or something.
Yeah, that's what you've told me.
Yeah. I think when you worked for Inoki, when Inoki was in his heyday, nobody could get past Inoki. Yeah. Whereas Baba, when he realized that his time was over, he started to phase himself to a background position and push other people.
Yeah.
And
does some tag team stuff, does some background stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that was probably, if you're looking at it and you're going, look, yeah, wrestling is prearranged. The endings are prearranged, the champions are picked, blah, whatever. Your ego is still going to get involved a little bit. And and if you're looking at it and you're like, well, yeah, but as long as Inoki is healthy and alive, I'm never going to be world champion or whatever the major promotional championship or anything. I'll never be the guy. But if you go to work for Baba, and Baba is like slowing down and taking less of the matches, and like you said, backing people up in tag team and 6-man tag matches, that has to look appealing.
Yeah,
and that has to look real appealing, And Stan Hansen, of course, would go on at All Japan to be the biggest star, definitely biggest Gaijin star ever.
Yeah. The The only dispute on that would be, I would think, had Brody lived, it would be a dispute between which one of those two would have been,
Yep.
But where Brody passed away, end up being Stan, no doubt the biggest, Gaijin star of all time over there. So I think that would be the only way that would have been. Didn't we say in a different conversation? We say two of the greatest, because I would imagine they both would have went out around the same time.
I would think so.
So I don't think it would have been disputable. I think it would have been, man, these two guys here done it.
Yeah, think of all the fucking matches that asshole in Puerto Rico robbed us with by that fucking move.
Yeah. So you got a name written down here.
Yeah.
King Kong Bundy. Tell me.
Well, King Kong Bundy debuted in 1983, and the reason he stands out to me is, first off, I can hear Jim Cornette doing Ernie Ladd's voice. Bundy, you big dummy, come sit. Yeah. That stands out to me, but also at the point where I was really paying attention to WWF wrestling, Bundy was kind of the lead guy going after Hogan. I mean, I think Paul Orndorff.
Is this 81?
This is 81, so it's a little before that. I think Bundy might have still had hair at this point.
See, that's what I'm thinking. He had hair when he first came on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But, for me, I remember that point where Bundy was the guy that broke Hogan's ribs, and he was kind of the point man in, what would that have been, 85? Going after Hogan for the Bobby Heenan family.
Okay.
So I thought it was worth pointing out, because I think of two villains from that era. I think of Big John Studd and King Kong Bundy.
Okay, so broke in 81. Didn't know that. All right, so we have some other sports here. I just try to have some fun with this and get ready to take it home after that. The NBA, the champions, I knew this. I knew all these except for hockey, actually, because being in high school and being a sports fan, I knew them all. So I think you probably would have known a couple of them off the top of your head. I'll go with the NBA champs were the Boston Celtics. I know during that time it was a big rivalry between L.A. Lakers. I was a 76ers fan back then, and then Boston Celtics. So there was about four teams really that each year, was battling back and forth. But in '81, the Boston Celtics won the NBA title. Would you have known the NFL who won that title?
I would feel comfortable at almost any point in the '80s if I were just guessing to say the 49ers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because they were.
Figure your location, you probably knew that.
Just because they were such a big, just such a.
That was a dynasty, man.
Yeah, that during the 80s, they were just they were either winning or they were working their spot back up to winning.
Yeah.
And of course, I think at this point, the Raiders had moved down to L.A. by this point, or they were moving to L.A. So we only had the one football team at then, because normally up until this point we had the Niners and the Raiders, and they were both 60 miles away. So those were the two teams here. And then when the Raiders moved out of the area, it was like, well, fuck you guys, kind of like we're doing now, Because we just like taxpayers just put millions of dollars into a stadium for them in the San Jose area. And they're like, fuck you guys, we're going to Vegas. And we're just like, what the fuck, man? You fucking horseheads. But I would think at any point in the 80s, if I were just guessing, I'd feel comfortable guessing the 49ers.
Yeah, you'd have been right.
Mm-hmm.
Major League Baseball, I follow several teams. I got a couple of my favorites that I could tell you the years they won them, and it wasn't in 81. I could have got it down to within. I had to think about it for a second, but it was L.A. Dodgers. And when I thought about it for a second, I was like, "Yep, I could have got that if you'd asked me." I feel comfortable in knowing, like you in high school, just following sports and just knowing, okay, these are the teams that are going to win. Now this next one, hockey, I wouldn't have got that one. We just didn't have a lot of hockey coverage in this area. We got our coverage probably from Sports Illustrated. There weren't, to my knowledge, a lot of guys that went to school around here that were, hockey fans, or our parents were or anything like that. There may have been exceptions. Had I lived up east maybe, or up in the north or somewhere maybe, but down here it still wasn't even, it was still coming for the small regional East Coast and the developmental leagues for the NHL.
Yeah.
They started getting popular at one time here in the South, and but yeah, we hadn't gotten into that yet. So, and I just wasn't a hockey fan. I'd see, okay, the Capitals won, or Red Wings won, or something like that. But if you'd have said, well, Bobby, who won it that year? I might have said the Bruins or something. I don't even know. I'm just saying. But it was the New England Islanders won that year. Would you have gotten that? Or are you into that hockey that much?
No, not really. And I would have said, I don't know, some fucking Canadians.
Yeah.
Good,
exactly.
I mean, look, there's always gonna be like a handful of small enclaves of fans of sports that aren't big here. Like, around here there are a lot of Samoans that play rugby. But when I think of rugby, I don't think of American fans. But it's a huge sport in American Samoa. And there's always a handful of rugby fans, around somewhere. A handful of NHL fans. There's a handful of curling fans. But yeah, when I think hockey, especially in the early '80s, it was kind of like soccer. It's like, hey, it's going to be huge one day, okay, but not today, pal.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So we thought, let's just throw it at you. Okay, the last thing here, a bit of business here before we close shop today. Number one from 1981, the big news was Hulk Hogan.
Hulk Hogan turns face in 1981. In August of that year, I believe it was, he ran out to stop Crusher Blackwell from handing Brad Rangans, a name that I'm surprised we don't mention more than we have, from getting a beatdown from Crusher Blackwell. During this period of time, so Hogan goes out to stop that. Johnny Valiant immediately fires Hogan and sends Blackwell after him. Hogan has a feud with Blackwell, and he wins. By the end of 1981, he was the AWA's most popular wrestler, and that's when he would start going after Nick Bockwinkel for the AWA World Heavyweight Championship.
Right.
This is, I would say, the biggest game changer in pro wrestling that affects us to this day.
Yeah, I agree. Good choice on picking him at number one.
Yeah.
From that year of 1981. That was the year that was 1981. So let's tie up any loose ends. Got anything to say about 1981, or how you want to talk about anything else from that area?
You know what? I think a lot of really consequential stuff happened in 1981, and every time I look at it, it just becomes more and more apparent. Hulk Hogan turning face. That is the thing that changed pro wrestling. That's what allowed Vince McMahon to go national. But we also see that during this time period is when Jim Crockett started to solidify his control over at least the titles in the NWA.
Yeah.
Some big names that just, kind of crop up. Of course, it's like probably the last classic era of pro wrestling as a combat sport, quote unquote. If you look at who the champions are, you got legit wrestling talent like Bob Backlund and Nick Bockwinkel are in there,
Yeah.
You got legit wrestlers / brawlers in the NWA championship scene with Race, who's just one of the toughest sons of bitches to ever live. Ric Flair, one of, if not the greatest pro wrestler ever. And then Dusty Rhodes, the second most recognizable athlete in the world.
There you go, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's
for sure, man.
That's kind of where I ended at.
I'll tell you what. I hope the fans liked it. I enjoyed doing it with you. I apologize if my voice is coming across funny or strange. I'm having a weird imbalance today in my right ear, and it's throwing my balance off all crazy, man. And I don't think it's anything serious. I hope it's not. I hope it's just some water in there or something. But, man, I feel more fucked up than a can of fishing worms. And I'm going to put some heat on this bad boy as soon as we get off of here.
I can't blame you. Yeah, I'm
kind
of
out of here.
Yeah,
man.
I'm kind of off myself. I just slept 12 hours while sober. So that's really weird. Well, you know what, Bobby? That being said, that was the year that was 1981. So Everybody, thank you for listening. For the late Tex Johnson, myself, Professor Jeremy Vilmur, and the guy I'm going to start referring to as Double B, Bobby Blaze. Bye-bye, everybody.